welcome to the morning roast.
Yo, we on the morning roast. Get a cup, sit down, stay a while.
Hey girl, good morning. I didn't do any makeup as per usual, but again, I wanted this to be a very chill vibe on Sundays. We all just pull up our favorite cup. This cup is from Franca, Brooklyn. They're handmade in Brooklyn. I found them at a cute little shop not too far from where I live. And then I realized they have an online store that you can order all kinds of stuff. I'll leave a link somewhere downstairs. Somewhere downstairs. My brain. Somewhere in the description box. Today, I wanted to talk about how did I get here? Nobody's supposed to be here. Like, seriously, how the hell did I get here? Let's rewind, okay? I grew up, my mom used to move around like crazy. She always used to move around. I don't know if you know this or not, but I was originally born in California, LA, California, in the Valley. Moved to New York when I was 2, and I've been here off and on since then. So kind of like my mom would move away for a year and then she would come back. And I remember being like the new girl at school, and it was awful. Like I would get bullied like crazy. Like imagine just like being pulled out in the middle of the school year and then having to go meet all new friends all over again. It was very traumatic as a child. I just didn't have any stability at that age. But then around, I don't know, 7th or 8th grade, I stayed with my dad for a brief period of time. My dad had a girlfriend who was slightly nuts. Just a bit. She used to teach me how to fight, and she would make me fight her until I would fight her back. And like literally throwing hands. Can't make this up. So I remember I was just like, this is not, I don't like this. And then I just couldn't take it anymore. So I just started fighting her back. And I remember one day she was just like, yes, you know what? Yeah. Hell yeah, now you're ready for school. And I don't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing, because then after that, I started going to school and I started throwing hands with everybody. I kind of ended up being a little bit of a nutso, right? I would go to school and just be like, oh, you talking shit about me? Boom. And we start fighting. So I became a little bit of a fighter, scrappy. I was scrappy when I was a bit younger. Hence, like, very short-tempered, very like have a lot of like no patience for you. And I was like that for, I don't know, a while. Again, like I wouldn't mess with you unless you mess with me. But if you mess with me, please believe like I won't back down. And I guess in a sense, I'm still like that now. I have a backbone. Like if you mess with me, I'm going to tell you about yourself. So that was Florida. I moved back to New York here for high school. And I decided I'm going to take up cigarette smoking, right? Because everybody was smoking cigarettes. I was smoking like Capri cigarettes. They were disgusting. I remember buying cigarettes and holding my breath because I couldn't stand the smell, but I thought I looked cool. So I was just like, smoking cigarettes. I would take my friends Newports. Like I would be running around smoking cigarettes. So I think I probably did that. And then don't let me drink. We all know the people who drink and then want a cigarette. That was me. And I think I probably did that for a month or 2. Like it wasn't a long period of time. And I was like, this is disgusting. I gotta cut that habit. I also don't have an addictive personality. So for me, it wasn't a big deal. And then I think I moved on to Black and Milds. If you're from New York, you know what a Black and Mild is. It does. Like the sound of it. The words. So gross. Ugh, makes my stomach hurt even thinking about it. It was so nasty. Smoked a few Black and Milds, smoked a few blunts, can't lie to you. But that was about it. I never got into drugs. I wasn't a drug girly. I partied like crazy though, don't get me wrong. Like I was club rat, like 20s in college, literally partying all the time. In college is when I started drinking alcohol, and I would drink a Corona with grenadine in it. How nasty. How nasty, right? But everybody was drinking Coronas with grenadine in them. And I would be at Club Envy I would be a club cheetah. Like it was definitely a time. So I went to college, Long Island University, downtown Brooklyn campus, which is not too far from where I live, oddly enough. And everyone stayed on dorm. And it was like one big dorm, which was bizarro because it was freshman, sophomore. It was also like seniors. And depending on what you were, is what floor you stayed on. So my freshman year, I stayed in dorm and I had to room with some girl. She was an international student. And then the next year, I was a cheerleader. Let me rewind. I was a cheerleader for a very long time. I cheered for LIU because I got partial scholarship. When I got to my sophomore year, I ended up rooming with one of my teammates, and we had our own bathroom, and that was a joy. But the girl I was rooming with would kick me out of the room all the time because her boyfriend was always around, and she'll be like, oh, so-and-so is coming. Can you sleep in somebody else's room? And I just remember being so irritated. Like, I really couldn't say much because I wanted the room with the bathroom in it. So we end up having to like go sleep in somebody else's room in the dorm building. Like I said, she did it quite often. Whatever. So we're gonna move on. We're gonna move on from that. So in college, yes, I had a freaking great time. But one night I was out. I know I'm supposed to be talking about how I got here, but I got all of these stories. So one night I'm out, right? And we were at, God, where were we? I think the Box. Does anybody remember the Box? Like the Box was crazy. The Box was like one of those places where you would go. It was like a who's who would go in there, and they had all of these like acts, these raunchy acts. Like they would go in there and like there would be little people giving blowjobs to each other. It was a weird place, okay? So, but it was the place to be. Like celebrities were there, everybody and their mom was there. It was just a very bizarro place. So I'm hanging out at the Box, and I'm downstairs, and I'm talking to this guy. And it was unisex bathrooms too back then. I'm talking to this guy. He owned a magazine back then. The magazine is no longer around. It's very, very old, very long time ago. And I go into the bathroom stall, and he goes into the bathroom stall with me. Now, these bathroom stalls were like from, like the door was top to bottom. It wasn't like no high school silver bathroom stall, right? So the whole thing was closed in, and he locks the door. And I'm like, what are you doing? And it was like super small. He's like, oh, let's do a bump. He was like, I gotta do a bump. And I'm like, I'm thinking to myself, I don't do drugs. So I know that most people who do drugs don't like to do drugs alone. They get a little bit paranoid. So he's sitting in there he's doing bump after bump. And I'm trying to tell him like, oh, I gotta go. I gotta get out of this bathroom. And he's like, your turn. Girl, it's like, how the hell am I gonna get out of this bathroom? Like, how did I get here? Okay. So he's like, your turn. And then of course I was like, oh no, I'm so high already. Oh, I can't do anymore. I'm gonna lose my mind. I'm high. And he was like, you sure? You sure? Like, it's just do it real quick. And I was like, no, I just did it right before you got here. And he backed off. And I was like, okay, we got to get out of the bathroom. Like, I think people are going to knock. He was like, yeah. You're right. And his mouth was like, He was absolutely harmless. Like, thank God I wasn't in this situation that was going to lead to be terrible. He was harmless. He was just someone who was an addict and needed a friend. But anyway, so I ended up getting out of the bathroom, and I ended up still having a really great night. But that was just a story that kind of like stuck to me forever, that I was just like, how the hell did I get into the bathroom with somebody who wanted me to do bumps? It was like the weirdest thing. I have so many stories about my New York bartending days. Like, I could tell you guys things forever. I think we should save that for another time. But I remember even like working, and there was a shootout that happened, and we had to all go underneath the bar. It was a mess. Like, the scariest night of my life. Thought the whole club was going to get shot up. But if you want to hear that story, I will swing back and tell you all my crazy bartending stories. Anyway, so college is when I started bartending. I think like right after college, because I dropped out. I did not graduate. I ran out of money. And Long Island University was super expensive because it's a private school. Had I have known any better, I would have went to a community college. But I was going to school for bio pre-med. I know, total shocker, total shocker. But biology happens to be my favorite subject. I'm just terrible at math. So I don't know what I was thinking because you have to take like organic chemistry and there's a lot of formulas. Girl, I was dying. I was like, I don't understand. I don't understand. I had to take a calculus. Like it was a mess. But I ended up dropping out, I think my junior year. And I was like, oh, I'll come back. Girl, it was cute in theory, but I didn't come back. I became a bartender. So I started bartending for a very long time. I want to say I was bartending for maybe 8 to 10 years or something like that. And I worked at every club imaginable, like you name it, and I worked there. I worked at Pink Elephant. I worked at Lotus for a very brief time. I remember this one time I was trialing at One Oak. Like it was, it was around that time. Spirit. It was when all the clubs were on 27th Street. What a time. What a time to be alive. So anyway, I became so used to that schedule. My schedule was very like I got home anywhere between 5 and 6 in the morning because the club closes at 4. You got to count out your bank and close out and do all those things. So by the time I got home, it was anywhere between, no, I have to say 6. I would always get home around 6, sometimes 7 when everybody was up walking to their jobs and I would look like a streetwalker, okay? Look a mess. I would sleep for a few hours and then I would get up at noon, go to the gym, come back home, eat, take a nap, and go back to work at 10 o'clock and start it all over again. And that was my life for a really long time. I mean, I obviously hung out a lot. I know I didn't have a lot of money because I was only bartending, but like it was probably some of the funnest times I ever had. I do remember though, like towards the end of my 20s, I started being like, okay, you're a loser. Like, what are you going to do with your life? Like, it's been fun. It's been real. You've been to a lot of different places and you traveled with boyfriends and things like that. Like, okay, what's next for you? So I started an online company called Required Flair, and I was so inspired by what Bobble Bar was doing. And you guys know Bobble Bar, it's like a fashion accessory jewelry line. And I remember reading about them and they got this venture capital deal. And I was like, this is cool. Like, I always loved jewelry. And so I started importing all of my jewelry from China. I started a website. I remember learning to code. And the only reason I knew how to code is from MySpace. Like I would Google all of this stuff. I was always someone who's been very much so into the computer and like into social media. I was on this website called Black Planet and it was like a dating site. And I just remember like always, no matter what was new, I was on it. So MySpace, I was definitely on MySpace. I was coding my own page. I was doing all the things, but at the same time, it kind of like taught me a lot. If it wasn't for like being on MySpace and doing all those things, I don't really know if I would have been interested in it. So anyway, I started this job, Required Flair. I loved it so much. Some of you have been around since my Required Flair days. The name Required Flair came from the movie Office Space, and it was when Jen Aniston was working at Tchotchkes and she wasn't wearing the required amount of flair. And I thought it was so funny. So that's where Required Flair actually came from. And to be honest with you, I thought the name was brilliant. I think it's still really good. So I did that. I got a publicist and the price points were very affordable. I learned how to like jack up the margins and how to order all the things and take pictures and started writing little blog posts about it, got on Instagram. And it was because of Instagram that I would make any money because I was selling this jewelry and people were buying because of Instagram back then. And this was like 2010, 2011, around that time. So I got a publicist and she got me in every magazine. I was in Lucky magazine. I was like in all of these magazines. And then it got to the point that it was getting so hard for me to maneuver and grabbing all this jewelry, getting her new stuff that she was constantly pitching. But I ended up getting pregnant. So I met my husband in Costa Rica when I was 28. So my girlfriend had her 30th birthday in Costa Rica and we all went, right? I was severely hungover when I met him. We were at a swim up bar in Los Sueños. He was at the swim up bar and he was behind the swim up bar, like as if he worked there. It was bizarre. And I walked over and he was flirting with another friend, which I could care less. I was not interested. He looked a mess. And I had lacked all personality because I didn't feel good. And I remember coming in and he was like, hi. I was like, hey, like super bitchy. And everybody was talking. I was kind of just there, like lethargic, just with my feet in the pool. And he made a comment, happened to be really funny. It was like really funny. So I laughed. The way to my heart is just be funny. And I laughed and I was like, oh, that's pretty ballsy or whatever. So anyway, I started drinking because it was like hair of the dog. And everyone had a good time. And they were staying somewhere close to the pool because it was like a gated community. And him and I, or all of us actually, went back to the house because they had another pool over there. And that's how I ended up meeting my husband. But I digressed. Okay, yeah. So anyway, that's how I met my husband. So I ended up dating him for 2 years, but he lived in Canada. I lived in New York because he's Canadian. So he would just fly in and out. Anyway, 2 years later, I ended up getting pregnant. And I remember I gave birth in Canada. So I lived actually in Montreal for a little bit and required flare was still going on. And I couldn't ship anymore. Like I could not ship from Canada because of the fees. And like the price of a ring was like $17. People weren't going to put an extra $10 for shipping. I remember at one point I could only ship once a week. So I would drive to Vermont with all of these USPS packages and ship like 80 packages at a time. And then it got to the point that I got really sad and I knew, I was like, I can't do this anymore because I live here. It sucked, but I ended up having to close it down. But if it wasn't for, I wouldn't say it necessarily failed, it did, but it was such a learning lesson for me. Like if I didn't learn how to do all of that and take that step of owning required flair and learning how to code and the blogging and all the things, I wouldn't have started my blog and my career wouldn't have ended up where it is now. Like I think some people see me and think like, wow, so successful. But remember, this has been an 11-year journey. Like this was not overnight. I've been hustling for a really, really long time. So after that, I was in Canada and I didn't have any friends. Zero. We all know how friendly I am. I am friendly. I like to talk. Like I value friendships. I'm not that girl who leaves her friends because she has a man. That ain't me. Friends forever, okay? Friends, family, they mean the world to me. And I'm a very loyal person. I remember being there. I probably was there for about a year. And I told my husband, and he wasn't my husband at the time. He was just my baby daddy. And I was like, I can't live here. I can't do it, girl. I gotta go, boo. So we ended up finding an apartment back in Brooklyn. I was like, I need my own identity. I felt like when I became a mom, I was really losing who I was. Like, I still wanted to find people who like cared about getting dressed and, still wanted to have dinners and like have a social life. And life wasn't just about being a mom. Like, I cared about who I was still while also being a good mom. So I felt like I was totally unhappy. I think I was like super depressed over there, and I just needed to get back into living in New York City. Like I needed that hustle to come back to me because I felt like I was losing it. So moved back to Brooklyn, lived in Dumbo. My husband's company was still in Canada, so he would just come back and forth every other week. And then me and London lived in New York, and we did that until maybe Rio was born. So we did it for like 4.5 years, but I loved it. I really liked it. I'm just an independent girl. I love my space, but it also made it like super fun. So when he came, I wanted to like get dressed and put on makeup and go for dates and get butterflies in my stomach. Like it was so much fun. But enough about my relationship. Okay, so now I started a blog, I started an Instagram account, and I didn't know how to make money. I just was like, you know what? I'm going to do this as a creative outlet. And I also got on Instagram because I wanted to meet moms who cared about themselves. Deadass. This is why I got on Instagram. I was like, oh, well, maybe I can meet like super cool moms who still care about themselves because my friends didn't have kids. And I felt like no one knew what I was going through. And so that's why I got on Instagram. And when I started the blog, it was a lot about children's luxury fashion. And I actually took my daughter's photos and she loved it and it was really cute. And then eventually we started doing a lot of mommy and me. And then eventually it turned to just me. She got older and, she didn't want anything to do with it. And I respected that. So a lot of it became me. It was just so weird how it flowed so naturally. So yeah, after that, I did the blog. And once I hit the blog, and I think I talked about this before on another vlog, but once I think 9 months after I started the blog, I remember I kept getting so many followers one day. It was like one day and it just kept, so and so followed you, so and so followed. And I was like, what is going on? And then someone was like, I'm here because of the BuzzFeed article. BuzzFeed did an article about me, or about my daughter actually, in our blog. And it went viral. Like it was crazy. And that was the start of my career because I remember I was just kind of like, whoa, I got all of these eyeballs. And then my first campaign was Stella McCartney. And because Stella still sold clothes back then. I remember I was on the phone with them and they're in the UK, right? I was like, wait a minute, you want to give me money and free clothes? Wait a minute, what? And I didn't even negotiate. The amount was not a lot, but that didn't matter to me. All I cared about was the fact that someone was offering me money. In that instant, I was like, I have a job. And after that, I got an agent, and the agent that I was with, I was the first creator that she ever represented because she was more of a traditional like modeling agent. And we grew for like 3 years. We worked together and we grew a lot over that time. And I learned so much. Back then is like, I'm an OG, right? So like back then is when social media was still wild, wild west, right? Like people don't give me respect now. They damn sure didn't give me respect back then. And let me not say that they don't give me respect. I'm just saying that people don't really understand what influencer marketing is still. So they're still questionable about it. But back then it was even worse. Like people were like, But I started making money, and I wasn't just making normal money. I was making very good money, and I was setting my own hours, and I was still very much so able to take care of my child and like spend so much time with her. And I remember I went to my husband and I was like, this is a dream job. This is amazing. I would wake up every day at 5 o'clock in the morning and I would make a coffee and write my blog and take all the photos. And I just worked so freaking hard. And obviously it's like not the same. You can't put it on the scale of manual labor, like being a construction worker or things like that. But this definitely is a job that you just need to be so consistent, and creating content all the time does get very exhausting because do you think I want to look at myself all the time? I'm over myself, okay? I'm over it. That's why half the time I'm like, girl, I'm not putting on any makeup. I can't do it. We're not going to do the makeup today because I know my voice. I don't know how y'all do it. I don't know how you listen to me, girl, because my voice sometimes I'm like, ugh. But anyway, that was how my career, it took a lot of ups and downs. There was a lot of trial and error, and that's how I got to where I am. And that just continued to grow as I grew. And I learned a lot. I know a lot about this business. If someone asked me if I would do a master class, and I think I would, but I don't know who would be interested in it. But I learned about contracts and exclusivity, and I can lightweight be a lawyer for you if you need. I learned all about the language and everything else. And that's kind of like, if it wasn't for this job, I don't really know what or where I would be, to be honest. Well, my daughter really helped me grow up, but I don't know. Like life could have been a series of different things, but this is where I am now. No longer smoking cigarettes, still never did drugs. And, I have to be honest, college dropout, I didn't turn out so bad. Sometimes we have to look up and celebrate our wins. It's very hard for me to kind of celebrate the things that I have accomplished so far. And I have worked with countless amounts of brands, luxury brands. Remember when I shot with Vogue in my house? Like, I've done some amazing things, but for whatever reason, I'm always like, okay, that's great. What's next? What's next? And I'm trying my best to just sit and celebrate the wins, be grateful for everything that has come my way, and then work on what's next. I need to be more present. You know what I mean? lately I have been losing the presence. And I went to this like retreat over the summer, and the retreat was Joe Dispenza's retreat, and he wrote a few books. I read one of his books and I got really into it. So I went to his 7-day retreat. I don't know if I ever told you this. I thought I was in a cult. Like I thought I paid to be in a cult, and I was like, oh, this is how people join cults. Like I paid to be here. I was so disappointed in myself. But I ended up staying because I was going to leave. And then I ended up staying. I realized it was more about me, right? It wasn't a cult at all. But I think what happens there, these people keep coming to these retreats looking for something to change, but it's you who has to do the work to change. I found it very enlightening. Would I go back? No. Was it a lot of work? Absolutely. But I know how to meditate now, and I know how to get myself to that place. And I feel like I've kind of, with work and things and all the things that are happening in my life so quickly, I just kind of been off a little bit. But anyway, that's how I got here. I can elaborate a lot more. I feel like we took a lot of stories and a lot of twists and turns along the way, but that's how I got here. Should I spare you? Anyway, happy Sunday, guys. I hope you stick around. If you are new here, make sure that you subscribe to this channel. But I'm going to go have some breakfast. Also, my pajamas. My pajamas today are from Ralph Lauren Polo. Only thing about silk pajamas is that you can't wear any creams or lotions, and I'm always wearing creams or lotions. So I have some stains in here, but I'll spare you. So make sure you subscribe to this channel. Hope you loved today's video. If you want to hear more of my stories, please let me know. You know I could talk your head off. I'll see you guys next week. Bye.